Now that you're working on like your final projects, you probably want some data from the interwebs, the internets, and that you want to like pull into your application. So the idea here is I want to talk a lot about what is going over here and what are known as the SWABOTs. I've really harped on this too much, but this is the students will be able to, right? Or kind of like this general sort of like students will understand or at least recognize a couple of these things. What I want to talk about are these main points. So let me just go over them one by one. The first thing is define what the client is and describe setting up the request. What is sort of like the client? You've heard like these terms like client and server before, yeah? No? Yes? Yet? What is the client and what is the server?
The client is the person trying to access the information. The server is the place that has the information.
That is correct, right? The client is like the person is trying to access the information, right? Typically, it's like the browser, right? So you, the user, are using a browser to like ask the internet for data, right? So for example, like right now, I have nothing on this. Dang, the homepage got me, right? If I were to like ask the internet for some data, the idea here is I would go to www.google, right? .com, and when I hit enter, I am asking the information, the internet for information, right? I'm making what is known as a GET request. So I'm trying to get information from a website called google.com. That's the idea. So now google.com, right, will simply give me back what is known as a response. So have you seen the dev tools yet? Mm-hmm. So if I hit Command Option J, Command Option I, they'll open up different parts of it. I should have used I. So in Elements, right? What does this look like to you? This right here. This is just HTML, right? So what they're writing is HTML. So the server, and let me explain, right? So boop, boop, boop. Let's go to our favorite drawing application. Here we go. And this is you, right? And this is Chrome. And I think there's a circle in there. And then there's some lines. All right, that's pretty good, right? That looks like Chrome. Wow, 0 claps. Very good. And then there is like this line. We'll just call this the internet. And then there is like another computer somewhere else. This is a keyboard. And there's like keys on there, and this is the screen, CRT styles. So the idea here is that you are the client, and this is the server. So I just use Chrome to make a GET request to awesomewebapp.com. What that means is I sent a request over the internet, and I made a GET request, G-E-T. I made a GET request. That GET request was give me the information at the server for awwapp.com. So if you really look at this, right, network utility, this is the idea. The idea is that like I can go to a website like facebook.com, and what I can do is I can hit this trace button. And it starts to give me this right here. What does this look like to you? Has anyone seen something like this before? An IP address, right? So here's the thing. Who here memorized all of the phone numbers in their phone book? Right? You have them all memorized?
Yes.
That's very impressive. I do not. All right? But I remember back in the day, there was a time where I had to memorize everybody's phone number. So I had like a top fave, like a fave 5. I was like, look, my mom, right, which is the house number, obviously. I didn't have cell phones back then. I'm a bit on the older side. And then what else? You remember your best friend's phone number? Yeah? And then maybe like one other person? Huh? Oh, my squirrel friend, obviously. Call them up every once in a while. Tree friend, you're right. No Nest friends, though. They're kind of weird. So the idea here is that, like, in your phone book, how do you actually call somebody? What do? You press call, but how do you find them? You dial their number? Do you go, like, boop, boop, boop? You hit 917? Do you do 718? You look them up by name, right? You're like, yo, I'm going to go call, like, Aunt Jemima, and you look up Aunt Jemima in your phone book, and you click it, and then it just starts dialing, right? There are no numbers associated with it. So the internet has done something very similar. Because we're not robots, we're not machines, and we can't memorize all of these numbers, but we can memorize our names, right? Like if I want to call Aunt Jemima, I just have to remember her name. So with Facebook, if I wanted to go, I probably shouldn't do this. I don't know if I'm logged in or not. But what I can do is I can figure out and look up Facebook's sort of like address. This is their server. This is where they're located on the internet. And so I can simply go to this IP address and it will give me facebook.com. So there's like a phone number, an IP address associated with the name, the domain facebook.com. So far, so good? Okay. So that's sort of like I made a GET request to awwapp.com, and then in the background, it looked up the IP address. It found the server somewhere in the world. And then it sent me back a response. That response was HTML. HTML. You got it, right? It's HTML. And then the browser, what it will do is it will take this HTML and then it will paint this very pretty picture on the left. And that's basically how the internet works. So you have all these computers that have all these HTML files kind of. You make a request to them and they give you the HTML that you want. Cool? Nothing crazy? Now, what I want is actually a lot of data. So what I can do is I can go to a website, Megabless, like reddit.com, right? Probably should have looked at this first. This looks okay. Actually, it's kind of sketch, but all right, let's just scroll down. Boop. Oh yeah, great, an advertisement, sure. So all of this is just HTML, right? If I were to just open this up, I get all of this HTML. That's a lot. It's pretty wild. So what I want to do is, let's just say I want to make a website that like looks at like all of the users for Reddit. What I can do is I can simply go to a route instead of reddit.com. It's probably a route called reddit.com/users. There's a particular resource available there that allows me to see all of the users there. I think this is just dummy data, so if you have an account, don't worry, it's probably not going to be here. All right. And so, oof. These are real accounts? Oh, dang. That looks normal. Oh, man, I should probably screen this, but I'll just like blur this out, right? The idea here is that like, this is what the internet gets. It gets a list of all the users from the database, and then it puts it on the screen. They make like a P tag for them. They make like an A tag to like click this link for each item in the database. So what I really want, if I'm making my own, right, it's useless for me to get the HTML. What I really want is just maybe like a hash with a key of name, right, and it's like USA Today. And then there's a key of website, and it points to, I don't know, reddit.com/user/USA Today, right? And then I have like their tagline, and it says official account of the USA Today, right? There's just like an object with all of these, there's like a hash with all of these things in it. So there's a particular type of data on the internet that we use very commonly, and that's called JSON. So what I want to do is I want to take this instead. I want all of this data so I can build my own application, my own like either command line application or website. Because look what I have. I have like some sort of data, maybe there's a bunch of children, and this children is what type of data structure? An array. And look, there is a display name of Brian, right? This person has an icon, and this person has a description. If we look very closely, whoops, to users, who's that first person? It's Brian. And then if I look at the second person, okay, I see video game attorney. That sounds fun. And look who that is. So that's basically how like the internet kind of works. It's like all this data. And the idea here is I can just go to users, and I can just check out their .json. Has anyone heard of JSON before? What is JSON?
Just a structured way of saying data that JavaScript normally uses.
Pretty close, pretty close.
JavaScript object, was it JavaScript object notation? So it's basically JavaScript.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah.
System.
So if you don't know what it is, and that's okay, the idea here is just JavaScript object notation. So the internet is basically HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If I want to send data back and forth, there's a couple things I can do. I can send a CSV file, right, comma separated values file, a text file, an Excel file, a PDF file, or I could store a lot of this data in what is known as a JSON file. The JSON file is a language agnostic sort of model for data. So in Ruby, what do we recognize this as? This sort of curly boy? A hash, right? In Python, I think in Java, it's known as a dictionary, or C#, it's known as like a dictionary. It's just key value pairs. You have a key of kind pointing to a string of listing. Right? In Ruby, it's called a hash, right? You have a key of kind pointing to a value of listing. In JavaScript, it's called object. You have a key of kind pointing to a value of a string listing. So it's language agnostic, meaning if I'm using Ruby, I'm using Python, I'm using JavaScript, I'm using Java or C, and I go to the internet for some data, it doesn't really matter what it is as long as they're key values. It just comes in as this JSON object. So if everything's transformed into JSON, I can transform it into something Python knows. I can transform it into a Ruby hash. I can transform it into a C# dictionary. You had a question?
I know you were pretty much answering, because yeah, I didn't realize you could use it straight from
Yeah.
not having to change anything.
So one thing I want to point out is, you see how easily readable this data is? When you actually go on the internet and you grab this data, this is how it comes out. Wow, so readable. Look at all the data in here. Something false, ooh, hide ads false. Ooh, let's turn that to true. But yeah, this is like unreadable. So there are something called Chrome extensions that you can download, and it allows you to see your data much prettier. So if I parse it out, you can even see it's color coded. I think I can collapse these things like this. Oof, look at that. So much easier to kind of deal with. So this one is called, I think, JSON Preview. Let me see. JSON Formatter. There's like JSON Viewer, JSON Preview. There's a bunch of different Chrome extensions that kind of help you look at data. But the idea here is that somehow I need to take this data, I need to get it in Ruby, right? Because if I'm not in Ruby, I can't actually write any code. I can't do anything with this data. So far, so good. So how can we do that? Well, I need Ruby to make sort of a request. How do I make a HTTP request using Ruby? And then there's all these things. The idea is I'm just going to speed it up for you. If you kind of go through this, you'll find like 4 or 5 really popular gems that do it. The one we're going to use is REST client. All right. So that's basically the idea of kind of like how to like figure something like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. You'll search through. And so there's something called REST client. And so it's a simple DSL, domain-specific language, it's not important right now, accessing HTTP and REST resources. We'll get to REST in Mod 2, but the idea is this allows me to make HTTP requests using Ruby instead of the client, the browser, like Chrome, Firefox, Netscape Navigator, Internet Explorer, or Edge. Yeah? So let's see how we can actually do this. The first thing is I know that there's a gem, so I'm going to gem install REST. I think it's REST-client. Boop, boop, boop. And there it is. It's installed. So I can go into my IRB, and what I can do is I can see how to actually use this gem. So the first thing is I have to require REST client. Okay. True. This is true because I have a gem that's installed globally. So if I'm requiring it, I now have access to it in this IRB session. Yeah. So let's just see what this does. I do a REST client.get, and I see, oh my God, look, a website. Very cool. I can just run this and see what exactly do I get. Anytime you're ready. Boop, boop, boop. Yeah, example.com is great. Example.com is great. Example.com is just a bunch of examples. Like this should run. The internet's a bit finicky at the moment. Network change. Oh no. Oh man. Look at that. Is anyone else's internet very good today? Very good.
Someone needs to reset the router.
Oh man, I think we should just turn it on and turn it off again.
Put a New Hampshire?
Say again?
Put a New Hampshire on it?
Yeah, just should do that. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Come on, dog. Let me turn. If I turn the Wi-Fi off, I think the AirPlay breaks, right? The AirPlay.
Maybe.
We'll find out.